Number 5, Pontiac GTO Ram Air 4, quarter mile time, 13.6 seconds. The Pontiac GTO is often credited with launching the entire muscle car movement, and for several years it stood at the top as the quickest and most powerful intermediate on the road. Even as rivals eventually caught up, surpassing it in raw horsepower numbers and quarter-mile times, the GTO never lost its reputation as one of the most well-rounded and respected muscle cars of its era. By the 1970 model year, things started to shift. General Motors finally removed its long-standing restriction on engine sizes for intermediate cars, allowing bigger displacement across all divisions. That meant the GTO, along with its GM siblings, could now be equipped with larger, more powerful engines. Pontiac introduced a new 455 cubic inch high-output V8, pushing out 360 horsepower. On paper, that sounded impressive, but in reality, it wasn't the top dog. It only made about 10 more horsepower than the standard 400 cubic inch engine, and while it delivered stronger torque, it still fell short of the high-revving Ram Air 4 400, which produced 370 horsepower and benefited from a lighter overall setup. Because of that, the true standout in the lineup remained the Ram Air 4 version. With its higher revving nature and sharper performance, it proved to be the most capable GTO you could buy. In fact, a test featured in Superstock and Drag Illustrated back in June of 1970 recorded a Ram Air 4 GTO running the quarter mile in just 13.6 seconds at 104.5 miles per hour. So while it may not have been the absolute fastest muscle car of that year, the 1970 GTO proved something important. It showed that bigger engines didn't always guarantee better performance, making it a rare exception to the old saying, "There's no replacement for displacement." Number 4, Buick Grand Sport GSX Stage 1, quarter mile time, 13.38 seconds. Not long after Pontiac shook the industry with the GTO package for the Tempest and Le Mans, the rest of GM wasn't about to sit back and watch. Each division quickly came up with its own answer, and for Buick, that response arrived in 1965 with the Grand Sport package, built on the upscale Skylark platform. Much like the GTO, the Grand Sport didn't stay just an option for long. It soon evolved into a standalone performance model, carving out its own identity. But Buick took a slightly different approach. Instead of going all in on raw aggression, the Grand Sport became known as the gentleman's muscle car, a perfect blend of serious horsepower and refined comfort for buyers who wanted both speed and sophistication. By the time 1970 rolled around, Buick followed the same path as the rest of GM by introducing a larger engine under the hood. This time, it was a 455 cubic inch V8, and unlike Pontiac's version, Buick made sure this was the top engine in the lineup. Officially rated at 350 horsepower, the new 455 didn't seem outrageous at first glance, but the real magic came with an optional upgrade known as the Stage 1 package. Checking that box transformed the engine with a series of serious performance enhancements, including larger valves, a more aggressive camshaft, and a 4-barrel Rochester Quadrajet carburetor. Buick claimed only a modest bump in power, but real-world testing told a very different story. On a dyno, these Stage 1 engines were pushing close to 400 horsepower, far more than advertised. And with that kind of power on tap, the 1970 Grand Sport and its bold, eye-catching sibling, the GSX, delivered serious performance. According to Motor Trend, these cars could tear down the quarter mile in just 13.38 seconds at 105.5 miles per hour, making them some of the quickest muscle cars of their time. Number 3, 1970 Plymouth Hemi Roadrunner, quarter mile time, 13.34 seconds. Plymouth didn't take long to respond to the GTO's success. Its first real contender showed up in 1966 with the redesigned Satellite, which could be optioned with the legendary 426 cubic inch street Hemi. That alone made it a serious threat on the street and at the strip. Then, just a year later, Plymouth stepped things up with the introduction of the GTX, a more upscale, performance-focused version aimed at buyers who wanted both power and a bit more refinement. But the real game-changer arrived in 1968 with the debut of the Roadrunner. Built on the Belvedere platform, which replaced the Satellite in Plymouth's intermediate lineup, the Roadrunner took a completely different approach. It stripped away unnecessary extras, kept costs low, and focused purely on performance. The result was a no-frills, budget-friendly muscle car that quickly became a massive sales success. By 1970, however, the formula didn't evolve much. The Roadrunner received a redesigned front end and a handful of cosmetic updates, but underneath, things stayed largely the same. The engine lineup carried over unchanged, and that lack of major improvements led to a sharp drop in sales, falling by more than half compared to the previous year. Still, performance was never in question. When equipped with the range-topping Hemi, the Roadrunner transformed from an affordable street brawler into a much more expensive, high-performance machine, and with that legendary engine under the hood, it delivered serious numbers. According to a December 1969 test by Superstock and Drag Illustrated, the 1970 Roadrunner could blast through the quarter mile in just 13.34 seconds at 107.5 miles per hour. So while it may not have been a sales success for Plymouth, a Hemi-powered 1970 Roadrunner remained one of the fastest muscle cars you could get your hands on at the time. Number 2, 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle SS 454 LS6. Quarter mile time, 13.12 seconds. Just like the Buick Grand Sport and the Oldsmobile 442, the Chevelle SS, short for Super Sport, was Chevrolet's direct response to the GTO when it first hit the scene in 1964. And right from the start, it proved Chevy could compete in the muscle car wars. In 1968, the Chevelle received a full redesign, giving it a more aggressive and modern look. Then, in 1970, Chevy refined the formula even further with updated styling, a sharper Coke bottle profile, and a redesigned interior. But the real story wasn't what you could see, it was what sat under the hood. With General Motors finally lifting its long-standing restriction on engine size, Chevrolet engineers saw an opportunity. Their goal was simple: turn the Chevelle SS into the most powerful A-body muscle car GM had ever built. To make that happen, they introduced a brand new 454 cubic inch big block V8, known as the Turbojet. And it didn't come in just one form, it came in two. The first option was the LS5, rated at 360 horsepower, but the real monster was the LS6. This version came packed with serious performance upgrades, including 4-bolt main bearings, a forged steel crankshaft, heavy-duty connecting rods, forged aluminum pistons, solid lifters, and a low-rise aluminum intake manifold. Sitting on top was a massive 800 CFM Holley 4-barrel carburetor, feeding all that displacement. The result? An incredible 450 horsepower, making the LS6 Chevelle SS the most powerful factory-produced muscle car you could buy in 1970. And it wasn't just about big numbers on paper. In a test published by CarCraft magazine in November of 1969, an LS6-equipped Chevelle SS ripped through the quarter mile in just 13.12 seconds at 107 miles per hour. That kind of performance didn't just make it fast, it made the 1970 Chevelle SS an absolute legend in the golden age of muscle cars. Number 1, the 1970 Plymouth Hemi Cuda. Quarter mile time, 13.1 seconds. The Plymouth Barracuda first hit the scene in 1964, aiming to carve out a space between compact cars and larger intermediates. Interestingly, it actually arrived a few weeks before the Ford Mustang, but despite that early start, the Mustang quickly stole the spotlight and even gave the segment its now famous pony car name. For years, the Barracuda lived in the Mustang's shadow, but even so, Plymouth kept pushing forward, offering a range of performance-focused versions that helped the car stay relevant in an increasingly competitive market. Everything changed in 1970. That year marked the arrival of a completely redesigned third-generation Barracuda, arguably the best version Plymouth ever built. Not only did it look far more aggressive and refined than its predecessors, but it also came with a crucial upgrade, a larger engine bay. That redesign allowed the new Cuda to house Chrysler's biggest and most powerful V8 engines with ease. While the rare 1968 Superstock version had already introduced the 426 to the Barracuda lineup, it was more of a drag-focused machine. The 1970 model, on the other hand, brought that legendary engine to the street. With the massive 426 cubic-inch Hemi, often nicknamed the Elephant, producing 425 horsepower, the Cuda instantly became one of the most formidable muscle cars of its time, and the performance backed it up. In a test published by CarCraft magazine in November of 1969, a Hemi-powered Cuda blasted through the quarter-mile in just 13.1 seconds at 107.1 miles per hour. That made it not just quicker than its Mustang rivals, but one of the absolute fastest muscle cars you could buy in 1970, earning it a reputation as a true quarter-mile king.